Join me on the Via Verde Compostela Tambria Lagola. It's a greenway that runs from about 20 kilometres north of Santiago de Compostela up towards La Corona. It's an old railway line. I'll explain a bit to you about the railway line in a minute. But if you're doing the Camino Inglés, I think, then it is a route you might take as part of it, or purely if you're in the region of Santiago and you're looking for something different, you have a nice 22 kilometres of segregated cycling with forests and rivers. So this rail line had been under consideration since 1864. It goes from Santiago to A Coruña, and that's the really big port, and in particular a big naval port, so obviously a rail line would be valuable. But it only really got started in 1927 because the terrain's very difficult. There were 19 tunnels had to be built along it of total length 8.5 kilometres on a route that was only 74 kilometres long. Now the construction of the railway got a bit underway in 27, but it stalled with the Civil War, and it wasn't until March 1943 that it was completed. So here's the grim bit of history of that railway. It was completed because of the hundreds of thousands of prisoners Franco had kept after the Civil War and worked in slave labour camps, many of whom died. The prison detachments, according to the information boards, were located near the large construction sites, and it was the bosses of the companies that had been awarded the contract who went to the prisons to select the staff, the healthiest and strongest. After their release, many prisoners continued working in the same companies. Since their sentences always included exile, they had lost all their property and could not return to their surroundings. So in other words, the Republican prisoners from the Civil War, even if they didn't die underneath what were often very horrific prison conditions, even if they weren't executed, were still exiled from the towns and villages they came from, so had a real struggle to rebuild their lives in the aftermath. And as that notice board points out, it didn't just affect them, but it also affected their spouses, most often wives, who found they had also been virtually turned into slaves. So it's a beautiful railway line, very impressive, running alongside the river for most of its length, but the history is indeed a little bit chilling and perhaps off-putting. Now, that said, it was a beautiful sunny morning, the cycling was good. As you can see, there's not that many people on it. I think they said only 28,000 people used it in 2023, but it's becoming more popular, and once it's extended, I think particularly to Santiago, more will use it. So in the end, I haven't recorded anything like as many two-camera pieces as I'd intended, but I'm on the Greenway that runs from about 20 kilometres north of Santiago, and just thought I'd do a chat here. It's about halfway on the trip. I think this is day 11. As usual, I've kind of lost track of the days. I know it's Sunday. And yeah, certainly it's been very spectacular so far. I mean, you'll probably have seen the photos on the Instagram. Oh, and I'm just coming up to a tunnel here. This is exciting. I hope it's got automatic lights that turn on. We'll see. I should take off my sunglasses, really, shouldn't I? Anyway, here we go. Does it have lights? It doesn't have lights. Oh my god. This is kind of exciting. Alright, I'm just going to... I can see light at the other end, so... It's just hope there's not a huge pit. I have a good headlight on my bike, which is lighting up the path about 2 meters ahead of me, so if there was a significant obstacle or a bottomless pit, I think I'd probably see it. But yes, so I might stick to the coast. I might cut out some of the mountain stuff. But we'll see how I'm doing, because your legs do get stronger this far in as well. It's just I haven't had a break now. By a break, I mean a 60-kilometre day in a couple of days, so I'm feeling it in particular. And today's almost 100, and I'm about 35 in and going a little bit, not 35 in, about 30 in. But anyway, yeah, all going good. There hasn't really been anything that hasn't worked for me at all. A couple of very rough, muddy bits. like yeah, one of which I posted extensively about on Instagram, but that would make a little funny story in itself. And a couple of bits of high traffic, very fast road that, while I didn't love, I know what's the equivalent back home. Voila. So I think it should all be manageable with that. But I'll spin this around and go back to time lapse. So the Greenway, as I cycled it, is 28 kilometres long. That's a section that went out of use when the high-speed rail went underground, well, mostly underground in 2011 on a slightly different route. But the final aim is for it to be 36 kilometres long. And it's running alongside the Tambo River, as I said, which is about 130 kilometres long. It's been included, apparently, in the top 5 Spanish greenways. And this was interesting to read because I was like, oh, I've done 2 of these, which was the Montes de Hierro in the Basque Country. That's the one that took me out of Bilbao. And Senda de Oso in Asturias. Now, that's going to be spectacular. And actually, the great thing about that greenway is I didn't even realise I was going to be cycling it until I was cycling out of the mountains, took a turn, and I went, oh, this looks like it's going to be a railway line. But yeah, it's very impressive. It's gorgeous and all sorts of things. So when we get to that, you'll enjoy it. I'm on this one until I reach the 40 kilometre mark, in which case I'm then going to be splitting off into the hills. But today I think it's 92 kilometres in all, which really was quite an ambitious distance to be covering. But I needed to make my way up around the side of A Coruña, which is basically why I'm going up into the hills and then out again. That whole bit of the coast is very developed. It's a very big city. I had thought of cycling into it to have a look at the Tower of Hercules at the port, which is an old Roman lighthouse. Might even be earlier than Roman, in fact. But I decided the trip in and out was a little bit too far in terms of the route. I mean, this decision making on this bit of the route was the most challenging because I had also hoped to go to Finisterre with my first thought about this. That was the initial end point going west. But I realised that I would be doing when I booked the ferry tickets and then I was working out the distance, I realised that I'd be trying to do too much of a distance every day. I needed to cut it back a little, and having cycled the entire route after the 22 days, as you'll see as I get further into it, I'm very glad I came to that decision. It was quite tough towards the end, and that wouldn't have helped much more. If you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing at this point if you found it interesting this far. I guarantee you will find all my other Spain videos fascinating. This is the 11th, but also the ones around the Highlands of Scotland and the Western Islands, and also, of course, the entire Irish coastline as well as the waterways. I have something like 180 videos in the archive, so one of the joys you can have if you go over the entire of the last 3 years is watch my hair turning from being completely shaved to my current, whatever the hell it is, mop, as I experiment for the final time with growing my hair long. It's not just a cycling channel, there's all sorts of things going on here. Anyway, the upper stage of this is where they're going through a lot more hills, so quite often you're cycling down into a cut like here, and that's because as you come up from Santiago to Coruña, there's actually quite a lot of hills in the middle of that part, and so this is the part that we're going to be coming up over them. And as I come up here, I turn right a little bit before the end of the trail. I believe there's about another 2 kilometres or so I could have followed it through, but the right turn made sense for me because I'm going to be heading up some quite steep hills and then down a fantastic descent by a couple of reservoirs. Now, day 11 of this entire trip meant that I was quite a long bit outside the part where I'd been able to do any planning in advance. At this stage, all I'd been doing was booking, looking to see what hotels were available roughly in the direction I was travelling at a distance of about 80 to 100 kilometers each day, and then booking them, and then doing that for the next day, and then doing that for the next day. Running my route map then between them. I use Cycle Travel for plotting maps. It's very good at connecting you up via quiet roads, and in particular for finding things like these old rail trails. Almost none of them I knew I was going to cycle in advance. I came across them, but my map was routing me onto them. I did 4 greenways on this particular cycle tour, and I'm going to put videos up of all of them, possibly the most brilliant being the Sendero de Oso, the route of the bear. So if you're interested in greenway cycling in Spain, or indeed in Ireland or Scotland, do give me a follow. I'll end this one as I'm coming up towards the end of the railway line now, or rather the point that I was turning off. There's only another kilometre or 2 of it currently in use. I think they may add a bit more to it in the future, but they need to rebuild some bridges. But I'll end with a view of the road that I'm then going to cycle onto, and then quite a spectacular bit of descent that I'm going to be doing, about 10 kilometers up that road. Because if you're cycling it yourself, then you might be quite tempted by these. As you can see, these are quiet rural roads with not a lot of traffic in them. I have edited out long sections of this, but basically for what I'm showing you now, this is the sort of road that connects all the way through. So you could consider going off the end of that greenway and going up, and in particular coming down this particular descent, which is a series of S-bends into a wooded valley with a reservoir in it. Now, I would kept going. I had about another 40 kilometers to go after this particular section to get to Ponte Dume up on the coast, and nearly always on back roads. So have a look at the channel for details of that.